Very good morning and welcome to the third hour of the Situation Room this morning. We are live from Nairobi to the world on SpiceFM, on KTN Home and on YouTube and on Facebook. City, give us the day's proverb.
Right, indeed. He who begins a conversation does not see the end.
He who begins a conversation does not see the end.
Yeah, like that.
Proverb from Mauritania.
You know, when you read it from the tablet, it's very interesting. It's much clearer. There's something about this screen that they've got here. It's clearer. I'm realizing that because I read it from the tablet. Now I'm reading it from my notepad. I'm wondering why is this not looking the same?
You're wondering what is this the same proverb?
Proverb.
That I had?
This is a different proverb. But anyway, same proverb.
Same proverb.
Same proverb.
Yeah?
Just clearer.
We have a guest in the studio. He's the Honorable Abdul Haro from Mandera South, the Member of Parliament for Mandera South. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Eric.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Asante. Pleasure.
That proverb from Mauritania. Do you relate? Is there anything similar in the Somali language?
Just repeat it again.
Yes, this I can repeat with great ease. He who begins a conversation does not see the end.
Yeah, definitely.
What does it mean?
It means once you begin a conversation, it might most probably kick off either a storm or a conversation which will take a life of its own and engulf, perhaps, if it was in a locality, engulf a whole region, a whole country, and it might become a big debate. Like what I think was a simple thing said by the Fafi MP in Garissa over the weekend. It's now become a big national debate.
He will not see the end of it, the Honorable Salah Yakub.
Yes.
What is this? He who begins the conversation does not see the end.
Right.
Karibu sana, Mheshimiwa.
Asante sana.
You know, when we talk about Mandera South, how far is it? What's the biggest town in Mandera South first?
The biggest town in Mandera South is a town called Elwak, where I was born. Elwak is just after you've crossed the Wajir border into Mandera, you pass a town called Kutulo, and then 60 kilometers from Kutulo, you land in Elwak, which is a border town. There's a twin Elwak on the other side of Somalia, also called Elwak, sometimes also called Boruhache. So it's an old historical town. The Second World War was it was part of the battleground during the Second World War. Yeah.
Why was it a battleground?
Pardon?
Why was it a battleground?
Well, you see, when the Italians and the British and the Germans were battling for control of Somalia and also Kenya, I think it was a strategic town for the Brits because it had permanent water. It was perhaps a terrain which was good for the military to operate from. They had built a fort there from which they had formed a base. The people of Mandera, generally that time the population was not very big, but Elwak was one of the biggest towns in that part of the world that time also. Yeah.
When you hear of Mandera, we think about very many things, including, of course, terrorist attacks, insecurity in the area. We think about the ongoing drought. This is one of those counties that was, from the very beginning, listed as those that are facing the serious ongoing drought. So there are very many updates that we'll be seeking from you. So let's just start with the current situation in terms of the food situation, the food security situation with the people of your constituency and then the greater Mandera County.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very good question because it is something that is really just like the conversation from the proverb is just really something that is actually becoming a big issue now. As we speak, Mandera South constituency and Mandera County in general, just like many parts of northern Kenya, is going through one of the severest droughts in history. Some people say it's the worst in 40 years. Others say it is the worst in 60 years. But definitely it is a very, very serious drought. And this drought has been a slow onsetting disaster since 2020. You see, in this country, we have two rainy seasons. We have the long rainy season between March, April, May. And then we have the short rainy season between October, November, December, around this time. Now, the long rainy seasons in 2020 failed. The short rainy seasons also failed. The same happened in 2021. The same is also happening now in 2022. So we are talking of 6 rainy season failure. And people in that region being generally people who depend on their livestock, camel, cattle, sheep, and goats. And these animals depend on pasture and water. And we don't have permanent rivers. We don't have lakes. We don't have oceans in our proximity. So the rains have been the main source of water that recharge our boreholes and our aquifers and our ponds. The rains have also been the main source of water that irrigate our land so that we can get pasture for our animals. Now, if the 6 rainy seasons have failed, then definitely you can imagine there is no more grass, and the water is also not there. So, and livestock is basically the main source of food and income for the people there. And in fact, maybe if I take you back a little bit, generally livestock sector in this country contributes about 13% of GDP to our GDP in the country. It contributes to about 50% of our agriculture labor force. And we statistics show that we consume, as a country, we consume about 600,000 metric tons of beef every year. So we are talking of a sector, an industry that depends on rain and water, water and pasture, and that industry is now on its knees because of the 6 failure of rainy season. So it means when you talk about the situation of food in that constituency and in Mandera County in general and in northern Kenya in general, we're talking of lack of milk. So those people who've been depending on milk, children under 5s, lactating mothers, elderly people who rely on milk as a main staple food are really having it very rough now. Meat, which is also a main part of the diet for the people in that part of the world. So if the livestock have died, and those who have remained have migrated, perhaps in long distance areas, sometimes some in Ethiopia, some in Somalia, it means the food security situation is basically very, very, very bad. And when your food security is bad, your general human security situation is threatened. And you know, when people now get frustrated of getting even basics, meals, food, and what have you, frustration leads to aggression, and that's why you see people who are not able to come. I mean, communities move with the animals and in search of food. And they come in close proximity with people who are either referred to as their enemies. And that proximity now brings them...
leads to conflict.
So, I mean, obviously, when you look at then the conflict and you look at the hunger issues, I mean, from what you said, very difficult to separate the two. And so, are we saying that the only way to solve the conflict, I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but the only way to solve the conflict is to then restore the resource deficit, to restore food, to restore water, to restore healthy livestock. And that is then essentially what would bring this conflict to an end.
Definitely, yes, and maybe I can even qualify it a little bit further. You see, there are 3 things that I normally consider as powder keg for resource conflicts and livestock-related conflicts or pastoralist conflicts in that part of the world where we come from. That is one, the impact of climate change, what climate change is doing to that part of the world. That one laced with bad politics. And then, of course, resource scarcity, which I've just talked about. Combining those 3 is actually the powder keg that is required to ignite all those problems that I've mentioned. And how do you then address those issues? One, I would say, I agree with you, and that I would say perhaps droughts, because of the impact of climate change, droughts have become more frequent. They have also become more intense, and they are not going to go away. The drought was there yesterday. It is here today, and it will be there tomorrow. And by the way, if you are in that part of the world, you are either in the middle of the drought like we are now, or you are preparing to get into one, or you are struggling to get out of one. That is the cyclic nature.
It's a cycle of drought.
It's a cycle of drought. And if you are in a situation like that, the best thing that you can do is to learn how to live without drought, because it's not going to go away. That's when now those issues you have talked about need to come in. The resources have to be provided. If we are not able to provide pasture and grass, then the government, maybe through legislation or through policies or through funding, can now create an environment of trying to mitigate the impact of some of this. We've seen countries like Iran, which also has pastoralists like the way we have. They even have special trains that transport pastoralists during drought from a dry area to areas which are not dry through trains, including people and livestock. So through policies and government programs and funding, measures can be put in place to be able to help these pastoralists, and then perhaps also teaching them on alternative livelihoods.
Absolutely.
Because sorry.
No, I mean, just on that, because I don't want to lose that. What you've talked about then, alternative livelihoods. Look at a time where the rain, and that may have been a long time ago, but when the rain did not fail, April to June, when that rain came out was expected later in the year. And a basic question, did you see, or did the people see that there was enough water at the time when the rains did not fail? Was there enough water?
Yes. Because when the rains come, they come in torrents.
Okay.
And we have floods actually.
Right.
And we leave that water go to waste.
There we go. So there's an opportunity that exists if nature was doing her thing.
Exactly.
The way which was supposed to be. Knowing also, because you've just said it's cyclical in nature, that there will be a time when it is dry, there will be some time when then there's water, but then already, the people on the ground are the best experts. They will know that, it is going to be dry again and it will rain again.
Right.
But we also know that when it comes in plenty.
Right.
So opportunities have been there to put in place reservoirs for tomorrow. Would you say that, or it has not been enough?
No, opportunities have been there.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the government has tried. There are some reservoirs, some water plants that have been done, but not enough. I think more can be done so that we can tap that water when it's in plenty, stored, and used during the lean times like we have today. Some of the ponds that have been done in some areas, they keep water even for 3-4 years. And probably if we had more of those water ponds in many strategic areas in the entire county, then we would not be suffering water scarcity like we are doing now. And perhaps we would have mitigated much of our problem like we have today. So that's why when I talk about government programs, funding, and the environment created in such a way that the people are prepared to live with drought, because it's not going to go away. And perhaps if to escalate this a little bit to the international level, for example, when we talk of climate change, right now there's COP27 going on in Egypt. The biggest polluters, the Chinese, the Americans, the industrialized nations. Every time we have a drought like this, they rush in with organist aid, relief and what have you. I think it's high time we told them we don't need relief, but we need compensation for the damage they have caused to our climate, because it is the emission from their industries which is affecting the poor farmer in a village in Mandera who doesn't know anything about where all this is coming from. So it's high time we held those powerful nations which are polluting the environment and causing climate change to compensate poor countries and poor regions like ours, so that we can be able to mitigate or even adapt, on the climate change impact that they've caused.
Mheshimiwa, as a lawmaker, how does our constitution or how do our current laws favor county governments with regards to the county governments coming to an understanding with partners, whether it is financial, whether it is developmental, whatever their needs are, to ensure that the counties benefit directly from these partnerships that, say, the national government has? Let me explain to you why I'm thinking this way. Turkana has problems which are very similar to your area. But something happened in Turkana. An aquifer was chanced upon. Well, it wasn't as though someone was walking and they bumped into an aquifer. I mean, no, there was research being done. Now, it is said that that particular aquifer had the capacity, the water capacity, could last this country 70 years. The unfortunate thing about that water was that it required processing for it to be able to be used now, which means something could be done with that resource to ensure that it benefits people. Now, if you say your constituency, your county has aquifers, now, has adequate research been done to determine the capacities that they have? Because an aquifer means it has water. And if it isn't something that is readily usable, that's when all the partnerships I'm talking about comes into play. Because learning to deal and accept a problem as permanent when solutions actually exist. If there were no water resources at all except rain, then it would be a damnable situation. And I would agree and say, yes, let's find ways of coping. But that isn't the only story, is it?
No.
So, as a lawmaker, and given that agriculture, do I get it right? It's a default function, is it not?
It is a default function.
Exactly. So, do our laws permit such a thing so that the issue and the dependence on the national government to come up with solutions which have all manner of documents written about but which are rarely implemented, can the county government then take the step that it should to do what they know is best for its people?
Yes, I think the laws are there. It all boils down to pragmatic leadership, both at the national level and also at the county level. For example, there are some functions like, for example, agriculture, water, which are devolved, yes. But then the other part of it, the policy making, is still a function of the national government.
Yes, it is.
That be as it may, there is also what we call the Intergovernmental Relations Act, which facilitates the meeting of both levels of government. The national government annually, at least once, the Council of Governors sits with the president at that summit, where they can iron out some of those issues which are a lacuna in law. For example, where the law is not very clear about what needs to be done by which arms of government. So that can address whatever lacuna that exists in law. But of course, more laws can be developed to give the environment more clearer picture and more clearer, direction in terms of what needs to be done. So here, two things are key. Leadership, you see, county governments are just 10 years old. The initial 5 years have been chaotic, as we all know. It was a new concept, new thing to all of us, and communities equated devolved governments to an opportunity for now local groups to devolve corruption from the national level to the local level. Some of the counties did not have even enough personnel to be able to run some of those functions. You see, where a CEC minister for education in the county is somebody who has never handled even 100,000 in his life, but is trusted with a docket with 2 billion per year. A lot of problems happened because of mismanagement, lack of knowledge, lack of experience on some of those things. But now we are 10 years old, and slowly a lot of counties are coming of age, and professionals are coming up to take up some of these positions in the county level. So if we iron out this question of leadership, and we have good leaders at the county level, and we have good leaders at the national level, and then we continue working on the laws to refine them and review some of them, and like for example, to deal with this question of drought, I've already written to the speaker on a legislation on livestock insurance. You see, we lose a lot of livestock now. And if we had a livestock insurance law where farmers can insure the animals, perhaps they would get compensated instead of being left to the vagaries of weather. So some laws like this can be developed, and through the intergovernmental relations, counties can even borrow from.
They can. You see what? Given the dependence of a county such as yours on livestock, and given the contribution that livestock plays in our economy.
Yes.
You see, why I speak to you directly now as a lawmaker is this. I understand that we have an abattoir somewhere in Athi River. Do we have an abattoir in Mandera?
We don't.
Okay. To my point, must an abattoir be a fixed asset, something that sits in a place with brick and mortar? It can be mobile, can it not?
Yes, it can.
What I'm saying is there are many things that can be done, many. And they are not impossible. One could argue they're not even that difficult. The difficulty is in someone getting their heads around it and the determination. Now, a member of parliament can push.
Right.
And it has to be a selfish push, because this has nothing to do with the rest of the country. It has to do with where you come from and the problems that the people who you represent have.
Correct.
And not just push, but make a lot of noise so that it is understood and it is known. Because the contribution can be enhanced. The contribution can be better. We have an airport in Garissa, do we not?
We do.
It's
Even
not.
in Wajir.
Yes, exactly. So now this issue of Nairobi being far, that one we've done away with. So if you're talking export, if you're talking optimizing this particular resource that is in that region, it isn't something that we can leave to time and the whims of bureaucrats who sit in the ministry at the national level, because then nothing will ever happen.
Correct. And I agree with you. And one big challenge there again, it is not insurmountable, you can deal with it, is the question of road infrastructure. Like right now, World Bank is planning to do the Isiolo-Mandera road. Mm-hmm. The Garissa-Mandera road is not fully complete. It has come quite a distance.
Where is it now?
It's now in, I think, Abaswain.
Mm-hmm.
And once that road is done, actually, when you talk about opening up Northeastern, let me tell you guys, Northeastern did not benefit from missionaries who helped other parts of this country by educating its people, building schools, putting up developments. Northeastern was left on its own by the missionaries. It was left on its own by the colonial government, and it's been left on its own by the successive Kenyan government for quite a number of years.
You're a polite man. Northeastern was marginalized. It was like it was a deliberate policy that was never written anywhere.
Exactly.
That development and anything that goes that region should be ignored. Not avoid, just ignored.
Actually, it was documented in sessional paper number 10 of 1965.
Yep, it was.
Which deliberately said, high potential areas, government should invest in high potential areas, and we expect that development to trickle down to low potential areas, which never happened since independence. So that one, I agree with you. I'm just trying to be a little bit polite, but the fact is the Northeastern has been marginalized for quite a long time, and the impacts and even the footprints of that marginalization is with us even today. Look at the passport issuance and vetting processes. Right now I'm dealing with a lot of questions from my constituents and constituents in the entire Northeastern region on people, students who've got scholarships. They are asked to travel, but the process of acquiring passports is become
nightmare.
a nightmare to them. Some of them have even lost the opportunity to access that. Some people are sick, they want to travel out of the country for medication. They are unable to travel because the process of acquiring a passport, if you are from that part of the region, is a Herculean task. So many people now waiting, like in Mandera, for example, over 1,700 students and sick people are waiting for the vetting process. For the last 3-4 months, for the vetting to be done, for them to acquire the passports to be able to travel out of the country. And the picture is the same in Wajir, in Garissa, and all the way. I've even received some letters from some people in Marsabit, all the way even in Kisii, where passports is being issued. The people of Somali origin are having it very difficult to get their passport even in other parts of this country now because of that vetting process. So that marginalization is not gone away. It's there with us even today. Look at the education industry, the teachers. TSC has made it deliberate that Northeastern becomes a recruiting ground for teachers from other parts of the country. And once they have gotten their recruitment, they are transferred en masse to other parts of the country so that our children remain uneducated. And those, actually, I always tell people, the youth bulge in that part of the world is a ticking time bomb. And we are creating a situation where those youths will remain illiterate for forever. And you can imagine whatever happens to them in the future is going to affect this country. Even those people who think they're punishing the people of Northeastern. A few years down the road, once those youth come of age and they are illiterate, they cannot access jobs, they cannot access opportunities, then it is going to be a problem for this nation even.
Let's take a break, City. It's 26 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. The Honorable Abdul Haro is the Member of Parliament for Mandera South constituency. He's here with us. We're talking about what's happening in that region, Mandera and Wajir and Garissa as well, the northeastern part of the country, in terms of drought, in terms of other conflict, in terms of even terrorist attacks and security in general.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
In the Situation Room is the Honorable Abdul Haro, the MP for Mandera South. He is popularly known as Kore. What does Kore mean?
Kore is a climber. So perhaps I've been climbing heights and the sky can only be the limit.
All right. Yes. And this is a nickname that you were given by your family, your villagers, or what?
Yes, it's a family name actually.
It's a family name?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about the situation in your constituency, in your county, and in the northern parts of the country, especially when it comes to drought. And CT, before we took the break, had actually talked about some of these things that you're saying require some policy issues, some legislation. You've written to the Speaker wishing to introduce a bill in Parliament. But there are some things that can happen immediately, can they? Can there be? I mean, if we talk about the contribution that your part of the country brings to food security in Kenya, this is the amount of beef and sheep and goats and camel that comes from this region that can feed the country, that can even go for export.
Yeah.
There's possibility of establishing more abattoirs in the area. There's possibility of even having easier transportation and faster transportation from Wajir, from Garissa to the nearest international airport, which is in Isiolo, outside of the country, or taking all the way to Lamu and shipping from the Lamu port. Why can't this happen? Why can't it happen? Well, not now because there's all this drought, but why can't there be plans to have this happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it can't. It has not been possible to happen, and it looks like it might not happen even in the near future because of the deliberate, policy of marginalization. I think many Kenyans don't realize the impact of that livestock industry, which I just mentioned earlier, on Kenya's economy. And the governments, the successive governments, have deliberately, taken more resources to other parts of the country and ignored that part of the country for quite many years. That region requires what I call a Marshall Plan, in quotes. It requires a deliberate government effort to, pump in resources that will bring those people, closer to where the other Kenyans are in terms of education, in terms of livelihoods and economy, in terms of health, all the sectors that you can think of in this country. The index, the average from that region is below the rest of the country. And what right now is required, for example, we are now in the middle of the very serious drought. Our livestock are dying. If there were some, markets where people can sell their livestock for good prices, that would solve a lot of problems, because these people can dispose of, instead of these animals dying, they can dispose of. Many Kenyans think pastoralists love their livestock so much that they hold on to them until they die. I think that's been a notion that has been peddled around for long, which is not true. Nobody wants to see their stock die as they watch their wealth, their assets, go up in the air as they watch. Some of them run mad when they lose all their animals. A man having 100 cows today, tomorrow he has none. You can imagine how painful it is. So if they had a market, we now have an international airport in Wajir, which has been used perfectly well by the government to wage war in Somalia. Military flights, take off from there, and they've been used very well in that perspective. But in terms of developing the livestock industry, transporting beef from Wajir to the rest of the other world, Middle East. And by the way, you see whichever way unstable the Somali government is, a lot of our livestock now, for example, from Mandera, is transported through Somalia to Middle East.
It crosses over into
Somalia. Even in Elwak, where I come from, the livestock market on the Kenya side, which naturally you will expect to be doing very well because of lack of facilities and development. The livestock market just across the other Elwak in Somalia is doing very well. And you'd expect, because of the menace of Al-Shabaab, insecurity in Somalia and all the problems there, the livestock market on Kenya side will thrive and not the livestock market on... sometimes you even think, do you really need the government to do business? Because
the other guys who have no government are doing better business.
They're doing better business than we're doing with the government because of that policy of marginalization. So we need, for example, right now, as immediate measures, we need... See, the boreholes, the few boreholes we have there now are running 24/7. There's a lot of breakages. We need government to pump in emergency money right now to repair those breakages. Secondly, boreholes need to be done in strategic areas where now livestock are concentrated as an immediate measure. Some offtake program, this issue of government saying they are buying livestock from Mandera, for example. We have 7 million, as a county, we have 7 million sheep and goats, 2 million camels, 1.7 million cattle. So we're talking about 10 million animals.
This
and then
is
the government,
a census as of what date?
Yes, through 2019. And then government comes and tells you, we can buy 500 animals from you and take to...
Out of millions that you have.
We have 20 million animals. The government comes and buys 500, and then they say they have supported Mandera to offtake some of the animals which are suffering. It's a public relations stint by the government, which is not going to sell anymore. I
want to ask you then, what's the position of leaders in this region? And I want to start from, I know that students in universities from your region, from across the country, when they go to university, they form caucuses from the region that they come from. And those are the people who then go on to become opinion leaders in the community, in business, in leadership, in politics. What is the position of the leadership of, let's say, your county and your neighboring Wajir County, and even further down to Garissa County, in making sure that the issues of northeastern part of Kenya are well articulated and well advocated?
We are all frustrated, my friend.
Do you have a caucus?
We have a
of
caucus.
Leaders from northeastern?
Yes, we have a caucus, not just even from northeastern. We have a very strong caucus called Pastoralist Parliamentary Group in the House right now.
I know it.
We have 105 members, and we can influence a lot of legislation in that house.
Yep.
But we need to be organized. And unfortunately, in the past, the leaders from that region have been pitted against each other based on which county you come from, based on which clan you come from, ethnicity, party. We have been divided in the past based on. But right now, if you look at the house, I'm happy to say there's a young crop of leaders who've been elected from that region, who've come up, and they have a completely different mindset of how they view. They've been making noise about this marginalization. Now they have the opportunity to do something about it. And I think it's just 2 months since we were sworn in. I think we'll put our act together. We'll come together under the umbrella of the Pastoralist Parliamentary Group and see what we can be able to do for our people. But I can assure you, Eric and my other colleagues, it's not going to be business as usual.
The marginalization has its inadvertent benefits. Not intended, but you see, if I look at the business community of our citizens who come from your region, the business influences have continued to grow. And somehow the business community seem to have found a way of working together. Communities have found a way of working together. Now, the point Eric raises is the politicians who are elected to ensure that these voices are heard loudly and that the resources we speak of and the resources that are needed actually get done. Given the economic might that has grown with the time, economic might is a very loud voice. It's very loud. It's listened to more than even the voice of the politicians, because that economic might is probably what determines who becomes a political leader anyway.
Right.
Okay? Now, if the leadership, the political leadership, and the business leadership don't speak as one voice, this situation we're talking about, it will persist.
I agree.
And whatever can be done and what can readily be done with the resources that already are available, it is not as though Mandera is resourceless or that part of the world of our country is resourceless. No, it's not. They're not resourceless.
It is. Actually, we enjoy, you are Christians. In the Bible, they say the stone that was done, the stone that was ignored.
It was rejected.
The stone that was rejected became the cornerstone.
Yes.
The hope of this country in terms of food production, in terms of the extractive resources, gas, oil, the livestock industry, the future of this country is in that part of the world. And it's better for Kenyans to start listening to the voices from that region, because it will reach a time we will say the way you treated us for the last 5 years is the same way we are going to treat you.
In this case, it isn't 5 years.
50 years, sorry.
Yes.
50 years.
Yes.
For the last 50 years, the way we treated us, most of the so-called high potential areas have reached the economic equilibrium. We are still a virgin territory.
Untapped,
both in terms of natural resources, in terms of food production, and in terms of livestock production.
If you look at the issues that we have, once we've paused clobbering the national government for the mistakes that they make and the things they don't do, there's an accountability factor that is not talked about loudly enough with regards to our county system. Because if I look at the amounts of monies that every county gets, it is a colossal amount.
I agree.
And I cannot and I will not be convinced that that money is actually ever used for what is intended, a small portion of it.
Right.
If the other day we were looking at ghost workers and the amounts of money in billions and hundreds of millions being paid out, that's just a lazy way of trying to siphon money.
Right.
What if the resources that are within the county, and county governments can be pressurized by the MPs and by the MCs, they can be pressurized. If those resources, let's leave the national government aside, pressurize them to ensure you get your money.
Right.
If the resources within the county is actually used properly, the very things we're saying, something that hasn't been done can actually get done.
Perfect. I agree. And particularly Mandera, where I come from, we are lucky. We receive 12 billion per year. And
Mheshimiwa, If I were to come to Mandera,
Can we see things worth 12 billion having been developed in the
12
county?
billion per year.
Let's not even try it. Let's just say 12
do 12
billion.
times
five.
for
Okay.
one.
In relation, it will depend on what is the baseline you're using.
I will let you. I will let
You can even have the
I will let
baseline.
you have the baseline.
Yeah.
and tell me.
Yes. If you look at, like for example, the first year of devolution, it was reported that Mandera County, the resources they received in the first year alone was more than the resources that county had received from the national government before devolution for 40 years.
Okay. Let me speak. Can
So
you
it was
please?
doing a lot of catch up.
Yeah.
Basically, what you're saying. is that
Exactly.
The last 9 years, you've been catching up with the rest of the country.
Exactly.
What the country has been doing for 60.
I can't lie to you. There's a lot of pilferage, a lot of corruption, a lot of bad things have happened. But the little that has gone to the people is actually life-changing.
A story was told to me by somebody who was part of the Commission on Revenue Allocation, and I found it interesting. And they were talking about how they went to a county, and one of the things that they found interesting was when they asked for the book of accounts and what have you, they were given a black book and said, what we did, it's like this.
We got this money.
We got the money. Then we called the different groupings, this community, this
Clans.
We told them, so you guys have plans. Okay, now we're going to divide that money. So you guys are the ones who know what you want to do with the money.
Just take.
No. We are giving you your money. So we're not going to bother you. You are the ones who know what you need. Take your money and use it. And then when we get some more, we will tell you again when we get the money. Now, I didn't think it was a bad plan, if you ask me. Because if you're divvying out resources in a way that the people are happy with, I see you're shaking your head.
The people are happy.
The people are happy.
Yes. Now, the problem is that the leaders in that particular grouping are probably the ones who took the money and did whatever they wanted with it, and it didn't trickle down. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, if I were to speak Kenyanese, let's say the first 5 years, watu walikuwa narudishia mwili asante. Okay?
Yeah, so we give it away. It's
Mwili
okay.
gani hiyo?
So we do the second 5.
Okay. Now, second 5, no excuse.
Over 100
60
billion.
billion.
Over 100
No
billion
excuse.
shillings.
Forget the long stories.
That's
What-
gone into in 9 years' time.
Precisely. The accountability factor should be left to MCAs. Because what we didn't have, we now have. Money arriving locally.
Right.
So there is actually no region in this country that can just keep pointing fingers at the national government.
Right.
We have resources locally.
Agree.
Yes.
I agree.
Now, if we can account for those and say the resources we have received are actually meeting the needs of the people as we know they need them, these things that we are saying can actually change. What am I talking about? I'm talking about own source revenue generation, building it, ensuring it exists within the county. Yes.
I agree. Some of us, particularly myself, I'm a first-time MP. And one of the reasons why I was elected in a crowd of seven people was basically because of my, I don't want to call it activism. I was actually very vocal in terms of the things we are talking about. The resources in the county, is it being used properly? Are we, I equated it to somebody stealing from his left pocket and hiding it in his right pocket. Because those days when we used to point to Nairobi, saying the center,
Yes.
they are pilfering everything at the center. It's long gone. You see, as leaders, unfortunately, sometimes we like criticizing and talking about our problems without also having, recommending any solutions for those problems. I think it's high time we also stood up to be counted as leaders. I can assure you, I'll continue making noise the way I used to make noise before I was the MP. I will remain vocal. I will remain true to the values that I stood for before the election. And I am very sure most of the leaders that are elected to this 13th Parliament, especially from Northeastern, are people who are elected basically on the same kind of a platform. People, we told the people, we will do this when we are there.
If they do not speak with one voice, believe me,
Yes.
these 5 years will pass.
They'll just come and
And
go.
we will call you and we'll be having the same. It's as though the 5 years didn't pass, and it's as though the counties didn't receive money, and it's as though nothing happened.
Yeah.
The opportunity and I
Point
think the
taken.
challenge is with the way you've said, the new membership or leadership from the area, from the pastoralist communities, coming together and let there be a leader who emerges, who then rallies this over 100 MPs and says, this is the direction that we take. This is how we can use our power and our strength in Parliament to get our things going.
I agree.
Look for the leader amongst yourselves.
I will definitely challenge taken.